Good evening, everybody, and very warm welcome to the Dublin Book Festival. My name is Sam Blake, and I'm a crime writer based in Dublin, and the founder of Murder One. You can see the poster just behind me here, which is Ireland's international crime writing festival. We're thrilled to be working this evening not only with the Dublin Book Festival, but with Dublin City of Literature, and bringing you a really exciting event focusing on 3 other cities of literature and 3 other crime writers. Dublin received its designation in 2010, and it's the 4th UNESCO City of Literature out of 39 other cities. It's a city of writers, as you know. We've produced 4 Nobel laureates, 2 titans of poetry, William Butler Yeats and Seamus Heaney, the dramatist George Bernard Shaw, and the extraordinary Samuel Beckett, and of course James Joyce, who I'm sure everybody's familiar with. But this evening we're connecting with 3 other cities of literature. Reykjavík, here it is a good start with the pronunciation, Reykjavík in Iceland, Lahore in Pakistan, and Dunedin in New Zealand. And from Reykjavík, we're welcoming Lilja, and I was practicing your surname, but I'm really not going to try it now, having not managed to get Reykjavík right. You're an award-winning crime and screenwriter, I have to say, and your first 5 crime novels hit the bestseller lists worldwide and won awards from the CWA International Dagger right the way through to the Guardian Book of the Year. Your latest book is Cold as Hell, I should say, there we go. And it's the start of a new 5-book series featuring, is it Aurora? Is that how we say it?
Yes, that's what you see behind me.
Perfect. She's a multilingual forensic accountant who returns to Iceland to search for her missing sister, and it was brilliant. I loved it. We're also joined from Lahore by Awais Khan, whose current book, No Honour, cover there, is really an incredibly gripping, compelling story focusing on honour killing, on trafficking, and a character called, is it Abida?
Abida, yes.
Abida, that's it. This entire interview is basically like just potholes full of pronunciation for me, so you have to help me out as we go along. She finds herself pregnant when she's 16, but that's really only the start of her troubles in this book, isn't it? Awais is a graduate of the University of Western Ontario and Durham University, and he studied creative writing with the famous Faber Academy. And his debut novel, In the Company of Strangers, was published to much critical acclaim. And Awais teaches an online writing course, don't you, to people worldwide, because it's on Zoom. And from Dunedin, swap books now, we have got Vanda Symon. Hi, Vanda. Good to see you. There we go. There is your book, Bound. And as well as being a crime writer, you're also a TV presenter and a radio host, and chair of the Otago Southland branch of the New Zealand Society of Authors. So no pressure on me here, a real live TV presenter on screen. But your brilliant Sam Shepard detective series has climbed to #1 in the New Zealand bestseller list, and being shortlisted for the Nagio Marsh Award for Best Crime Novel, and the John Creasy New Blood Dagger. So now I've managed to mess up all of that. Let's get on to some questions. I love actually that all your protagonists are really feisty females. So we're going to have to talk a little bit about that later. But we're united by our crime genre. But I also want to ask you about how living in a city of literature has affected your work. So Lilja, if we can start with you, because you have your beautiful northern lights behind you there. Tell us a little bit about Reykjavík as a city of literature and how that's impacted you.
Yeah, well, I think Icelanders in general are quite bookish people. We love books, and we bind quite a lot of our self-image to books. Reykjavík is a city of literature because of our medieval literature, the sagas. We are very proud that we actually have a Nobel laureate, Halldór Laxness, but we are only 330,000 people, and having a Nobel laureate for a nation that reads and writes and speaks in a language that's it's just a miniature language. It's so small. I think it's very important for us, and I think this being a UNESCO City of Literature was kind of a recognition of our status as a bookish nation, as a nation of readers and literature. So I think that's was very positive for us, and for me, it's just part of my self-image also, as being one of those people.
Yeah,
that
part of your
reads and
heritage.
writes.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful that comes through. The same as Ireland, it's very bookish sort of a place. Vanda, is that the same for you in Dunedin? Tell us a little bit about Dunedin and the City of Literature.
So Dunedin City of
Literature. Sorry. I think we're just going to have to start again on the pronunciation.
It's entertaining. It's awesome. So Dunedin City of Literature, I'm really excited to be part of the City of Literature. And one of the very cool things for me personally was that I was at the very first meeting where a group of us got together and said, hey, let's pitch Dunedin as a city of literature. Extra special because my mum was here on holiday, and so she came along to the meeting too. It was that kind of a nice, relaxed thing. But Dunedin and this whole area is so rich with its history. New Zealand and it's literally seen to some countries, Icelandic sagas may seem quite young, but we've got a huge history of oral storytelling with our Māori, and then also with our written literature as well. And Dunedin was seeded very early on in the piece. It was a university. It had one of the first libraries here that was actually helped funded by Andrew Carnegie, the American philanthropist.
Yeah.
And we've got this wonderful history of poets and novelists and writers and drama and theatre. So to tie that all in together and then get that recognition within New Zealand and then the world that, yes, we are a city of literature was really, really exciting. And again, as part of that, as a writer in a city of literature, we're so supported, hugely supported. It's such a beautiful community. The library and the people involved in the City of Literature promote and are very, very proud of our writers. And wherever we are, just even like our local small writers through to our international sellers and people who do well overseas. So it's a lovely, nurturing, creative space to be in.
That's wonderful. And I think that's what it's all about, really, isn't it? It's about creative cities, and it's about bringing all of those things together in the one place. Is the same true for you, Awais and Lahore?
Yes. So Lahore is a city of 13 million people, and it's always been the cultural capital of the region. And it's gone through several upheavals. It was initially, we had the Mughals here, and then we had the British, and then after that, the independence. But throughout that, Lahore has always been the cultural and the literary capital, and it has produced some amazing writers. I'm sure you're familiar with people like Parveen Shakir and Manto and all of them. So I remember there's this place called the Bhakti House. It was made in the 1800s, I think, and it's still going strong. So literary people from all over the country used to congregate there and talk about literature and everything. So Lahore does have a very significant history of literature. So it did influence me, because I felt that if I could do even a little bit to honor the city where I was born and raised, then it would be great. I would consider it an honor. So yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. And your first book, No Other Country, is set in, is it No Other Country? Have I got that wrong? No. Tell me, No Country.
Yes.
What's the title of your first one?
In the Company of Strangers. Yeah.
In the Company of Strangers. So I'm doing really well here, aren't I? That is set in Lahore. This is my point.
Yes,
but the new book is set a little bit in Lahore, but outside of it, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So how did you find the difference between writing about the city and the country?
Oh, yes. I had to do a lot of research in order to get it right, because I didn't visit rural Pakistan as much as a child. But for this, I had to do a lot of research to see how life was lived. And it really depressed me when I saw everything that went on in the villages in Pakistan. I mean, in some villages, people still don't know that Benazir Bhutto is dead, and they're still voting for her party. And it's been 13 years, 14 years since she's died.
Goodness.
So you can just imagine what goes on in rural Pakistan. So yeah, but for Lahore, writing Lahore is always a pleasure. It's always amazing to bring Lahore to life as I see it. So that wasn't too hard.
It's yeah, that's fantastic. And Lilja, you bring Reykjavik hugely to life in your books too, don't you? I mean, it's setting with all of the books. I feel like the setting is a character. Really, it's a really strong sense of place. Was it hard? Was it a difficult decision to set it there for you?
No, I have lived, in many places in my life, and when I was a child, I lived in many countries. But when we lived in Iceland, it was always in the capital area, in Reykjavik or the surroundings, and it's my place. It's the place that I know and I want to write about. So. It's always the heart of my stories, even if they travel, like my drug smuggling series. Of course, there was like traveling back and forth from the country, but the heart of the story is always Reykjavik, and I like it, a cityscape in a way, and it's also, it's like every town in Iceland is so grounded in the nature. Everywhere in Reykjavik, you can see a mountain. There's a blue ring of mountains all around. You're never far from the country itself, even if you're in a we call it a city, but it is actually a town. It's like 180,000 people.
Goodness, yeah. But you get that, you actually get a very strong sense through the book of the town and then the area around it. Aurora, you've lived in loads of different places, haven't you, and been brought up in loads of different places. And Aurora travels from Edinburgh to Reykjavik. So what's lovely, I felt, with her was that because she had been living away for a while, she was coming back and she was seeing Reykjavik with fresh eyes. And I thought that was a really clever way of showing the city, because me, as somebody who hadn't been there, then was seeing it through her eyes.
Yeah, and that was something that I wanted to do, because this has been the experience through my life, is always coming back to Iceland. And when you move away and you come back, there's always something that has changed. Yeah. And you're kind of missing a place that was, especially Iceland is such a fast evolving culture. It changes a lot every year. And also because it's a small nation, there's all sorts of fashion and trends and stuff that just comes and goes quite fast. Everyone kind of takes up a custom all of a sudden, and then, they don't, So it's always kind of a surprise to come back. And I wanted to kind of describe that experience of a character that, comes back home in a way, but is it your home, or is it, something else now?
Yeah. No, I thought it was really very well done, and it was really interesting. It was really interesting to see it through her eyes. But yeah, I thought that sense of dislocation of where is home came across really clearly, because she very much feels like she's in two different places the whole time, doesn't she? And compares herself to her sister the whole time, because it's that particular book is about the search for her missing sister. And so we're propelled through the story. It's great to really. I mean, I loved all the books actually. Your style flows, and I just was gripped by all of them. Sam Shepherd, Vanda, for you, was it an easy decision to base it in your hometown, or did you were there questions over that?
When I first started writing the Sam Shepherd novels, I wasn't living in Dunedin, actually. So I had a young woman come to Dunedin as a student and did my undergraduate degree here in pharmacy, and then moved away again. And the first Sam Shepherd novels was actually set in Matara, which is a very small town, probably about 2.5 hours south of here. And then from Matara, Sam moved to Dunedin. In that time, my family and I moved to Dunedin, moved back here as well, as fate would have it. So it sort of was like the perfect happy intersection of life events that brought me back here. But one of the choosing to write the novels in firstly Matara and then Dunedin wasn't actually that difficult a decision, because I'd always been captured by Dunedin as a city, and the South Island just felt very much like heartland New Zealand for me, and this is where I wanted to set my novels. So Dunedin as a physical city, it's beautiful. We have hills surrounding a beautiful harbour. There's a green belt. It's a lot of trees. So it's a physically beautiful city, but also it's one where the weather is so variable. There's a great Crowded House song, 4 Seasons in One Day, which pretty much describes here. We're in spring now. About a week and a half ago, there was snow on the hills. And then, a couple of days later, it was 18 degrees Celsius. So the weather, and we can have driving southerlies that come from the Antarctic and whip through. Then we can have nor'westers that come across from Australia, and it's really hot winds. So it's hugely variable. And that almost brings another element to the city itself and how the people who live in that city react. One of the other fun things for my character, Lilja was talking about Reykjavik being a town. So Dunedin's like 120, 130,000 people. So it's a small city, but it's a complete one. So it's got everything you need. But my character, her view of it's quite different because she came from a little town of 1,200. So for her, coming to Dunedin's like coming to the big smoke. Yeah. It's all very exciting, slightly threatening, a bit odd. So I think that physical environment is very much influenced by your character's perceptions of it, whether they're coming from a little place to a big place, coming home from being away for a while, or not, can make a huge difference. So it's been lovely living in Dunedin and writing about it and using its quirks and characteristics. It's got Gothic-y type buildings, it's got modern buildings, it's slightly manky around the edges, it's not a polished town. It is what it is. I enjoy celebrating it by sullying it with bodies and murders.
I think that's wonderful. It's great to have any location where there's lots of contrasts, where you've got city and then you've got country, the mountainous areas, and then volcanoes in Lilja's book, I think I mentioned, aren't they? And I think that gives you wonderful contrasts, and certainly from a reader's perspective, it makes it so much more interesting to read, because we really get to see a whole different side of the city. And for you in Lahore, as you said before, Avish, it very much is countryside and it's the city. You get a real sense of the number of people, because we've talked about populations here. For you, people are a big issue, aren't they? You've got quite a big population there. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. Well, yes, overpopulation is a huge issue in Pakistan, and we have one of the highest birth rates in the world because birth control is actively discouraged for some reason. I mean, not by the government, but by people. And yes, so Lahore is growing at an explosive rate. The population is just exploding. So that means that Lahore has places that are very posh, that are very nice, very beautiful. But then there are places that are not that great and quite. The crime rate is quite high there and be a bit unsavory. And then there's the old city, which is literally crumbling to the ground. It's not being taken that well. I mean, they're making efforts to do that now, the government, but it's a bit too little, too late sort of situation. So that's where no honor is set, actually, where Buddha comes to live. It's old Lahore. Mm-hmm. So it's not exactly the walled city. It's actually a little outside of the walled city, but in Anarkali. So Anarkali is a very popular bazaar. So I'm sure you know what a bazaar is. It's like a shopping area. So it's a very popular bazaar, very old bazaar. It's named after a courtesan who was actually buried alive. Not buried alive, but she was sort of cemented alive in a room because she fell in love with the prince, the Mughal prince. So the king had her cemented alive in a room, and she died there. So it's named after her, and and that bazaar is good and bad. So she's in one of the bad parts of that bazaar, and that's where she lives. And so yeah, it was very interesting to write about these areas because I haven't personally spent a lot of time there, but for this novel, I did go and spend time there. So it was a very eye-opening experience for me that this is also another side of Lahore that I'm not familiar of. Mm. So yeah.
And again, in fact, she's come from a small village, hasn't she? Out in the quite a long way away.
For her, yeah. For her, and so like the big city.
Totally, and so we see it through her eyes again, which is great, yes, because that gives us a sense of what that city's like.
Absolutely. And Lahore is like, I mean, if you ever visit Lahore, you'll notice that it's divided into segments. So you'll have a posh area, and then there'll be an area that is literally very, very poor. And then immediately you're in a posh area again. So it's a very different sort of city, and it's all built very haphazardly, so you don't really have an idea of where you are at any given time. So yeah.
Goodness, it's really interesting to hear about how different they all are.
Yeah.
Lilja, why did you decide to write crime originally? What attracted you to it as a genre?
Well, I've always loved crime. I had very bookish parents, and my father is a very serious literature man, so he chose reading lists for me when I was a child. So it was serious, heavy stuff that I was supposed to read. And then my mom is a crime fiction mad, so she recommended crime books. So that was kind of my enjoyment reading. So I think it comes from that. I want to entertain people. I want them to forget about the time and place they are in, and just enjoy the read and be transported to another world where there are high stakes and excitement. And I always enjoyed writing, and I did write for school papers and stuff like that when I was young, but I didn't write my first crime novel until 2008, when there was an advertisement by a publishing company that they were looking for the new Dan Brown.
Ooh.
So I thought,
that's me?
Yeah, that's me. So I wrote the novel and sent it in, and then it was like a snowball down a hill.
Wow, that's a fantastic story. That's really great. And were you already writing for screen before that, or
no? Actually, that's a thing I've been doing for years. Trying to get myself into the screenwriting industry, and it's very hard. It's very male-centered. It's very quite exclusive in so many ways. But now I am doing that, as on the side. I write a book a year and a few episodes of TV, and I think it actually goes very well together, because it keeps me writing, it keeps the flow going in a way, but I don't have to, but it's very different, because in the screenwriting you have to get everything in the dialogue. And so it's a very different technique. So it kind of gives you a break. It's good to go back and forth and always still be writing, which I like.
Yeah, that's the important thing, isn't it? Vanda, for you, are you did you pick crime for any particular reason, or is it something that you really read and loved, or did you just have this idea?
Me turning to crime fiction was a very pragmatic choice. So I was always an avid reader, and so I just, as a kid, just assumed that I'd write books one day because I read books. That's what you do. Mm-hmm. But when it came to a time in my life where I was able to write books, I had a 6-month-old and a 2-year-old child, and I loved reading historic fiction, and I loved reading crime fiction, and I had to examine exactly what I could do with the limitations of having little babies. And historic fiction really required a lot of going to archives, libraries, researching. This is of course, pre-internet pretty much days. You had to physically go in and do your research in places, but to get it accurate, you had to put that work in. And you might not have noticed, but archives and libraries don't like babies and things that poo and spew and
make noise.
Create a mess. Make noise. So I thought, okay, well, crime writing it is. So it was just a really, really pragmatic choice. Also, writing really appealed to my inner scientist, so another science type background. I love that whole forensic side of things and the science and things behind it. So it certainly it felt like a really good choice to make. In fact, the only time I've ever won a writing competition was for a 6-word. It was one of those 6-word story competitions run by our local newspaper, and so I put my story that one was called "Had Babies Drove Me to Crime."
That's perfect. I'm laughing at you saying that historical fiction is tons of research and crime fiction isn't, because in fact, getting the crime fiction, the detail and detection, and is huge. So it's like, but I think, as you say, you're a scientist, and that mind is a very logical process, isn't it? So perhaps that's what helps you along the way there. But there's a lot. I think there's a lot of work there. It wasn't an easy option.
No.
But it's great. And actually, to pick a detective too is even more sort of jumping in the deep end, isn't it? Because you've got to make sure that she knows what she's talking about.
Yeah, I had the advantage. I had someone in the family who had been a former police detective, and I had a tame neighbour who was a police detective, and his wife told him that he was going to have to talk to me and he had to answer my questions.
Excellent.
So that worked perfectly.
That's what you need, isn't it? And that gets you that sense of the culture, I think, of the force in the area, and that comes across very. She's very sharp and she's very witty, and you get a real sense of her being a police officer within a unit and everything. She's fantastic. Avish, your books are slightly different. They're not series books. They're standalones, and they're classified as crime, but it's not the same in the detective sense, is it? But this, I mean, there's a lot going. There's a lot of bodies and things happening. Certainly in book to read. I mean, certainly as a woman reading it, a Western woman reading it, it was quite an eye opener, to say the least. So why did you go that route in terms of when you were thinking about your first book, what to write?
Well, for me, it was like Vanda says, I was always an avid reader, but I never thought that I would be a writer, because I just never thought I'd have the skills to write a book, especially in English, because English is not my first language. So it actually came as a surprise, because I was encouraged in college, and then when I took the paper course, and I just the feedback and the support I got from everyone, I was like, okay, yeah, I think I can write. And In the Company of Strangers was it was like Vanda says, it was a very pragmatic decision for me. I'm sorry, I'm just parroting whatever Vanda says, because really that's exactly what I went through, because I move in a certain section of society in Pakistan. So I had an idea of how people behaved in Lahore. So that's where the idea for In the Company of Strangers came in. With no honor, what happened was that I initially wrote a story about this, and my agent took one look at it, and she's like, what? She's like, you have to expand this into a novel. I was like, I have no idea how this thing works. I can't do it. And she's like, give it a try. If you can't, then it's fine, but give it a try. And around that time, there was this news about a high profile murder of a social media celebrity in Pakistan whose own brother killed her in cold blood because he felt that she was dishonoring the family. And that got me thinking that if someone as popular as this girl died due to this thing about honor, then what chance do women in rural areas have, and who will tell their story? Where do they? How to tell their story? So I was like, if I can do anything to shed light on this gruesome practice, then I should. So that's when the research started, and then I visited the rural areas and I saw whatever was being done there, and I interviewed people, and it was just such a depressing picture. But that is where No Honor came from. And I think it's just that as a writer, I feel I need to write about issues that are happening in Pakistan. I mean, this might make me very unpopular in Pakistan. I mean, it has, but I can't let that affect me. So
yeah, but it's amazing because the characters, although they're very much the female characters are struggling. They feel like they're struggling constantly.
Yeah.
You've got some very feisty, strong female characters in there. How did you and you write the female voice really well. So how did you find that difficult, or was that something that you just kept working at?
I actually, it's actually pretty surprising, because some of the bad reviews that I get, they say that this guy doesn't seem like he's ever spoken to a female before. So I'm like, okay, fine. But yeah, I do think that it does. Both Abida and my previous book, protagonist Mona's, their voices came to me very strongly, and I felt very strongly for them, and it felt very natural to write about them. Whereas the male protagonists were a bit difficult to get into, which is, I don't know what it is, but yeah, I do feel that the female characters I write about are much stronger, and I like them to be strong. I want them to be strong, because if they have any hope of surviving in Pakistan, they have to be strong.
Yeah, no, definitely. And were those reviewers male by any chance?
Some of them, yes, some of them were female, but yeah, it's just that's the thing. You have to take the good things and you have to take the bad things in their stride. Yeah.
That's it. You always get a mixture. There's always somebody who doesn't like it and somebody who loves it. So this is the thing. So we keep going, isn't it? Lilja, when you were thinking about this new 5-book series, why did you settle on Aurora as your character, as your lead character? What was it about her that attracted you? Sort of, how did she come about?
I wanted someone that returns, and looks at my country from with an outsider's eye. And I wanted a character that would be a strong female, and both in the spiritual sense, but also in the physical sense. As you know, Nordic women are very big and strong, myself included. But she is like one step, further than that. She's almost a giantess. So she's very tall, very strong, and she actually cultivates her strength quite physically. She lifts weights and she beats up bad guys. That's it was a character that would move through the world quite a lot like a man would. She's not really afraid of anything.
No, she's
except the ghosts of her past or something like that, but not any bad guys or anything like that. So she's courageous, and her femaleness is not really an issue because she just goes through. So that was interesting for me to make a female character that would just face all sorts of situations with a lot of confidence, in herself and her abilities.
Yeah, well, she certainly does that for sure. She's great. She's great to read, actually. She's very confident, and I love the fact that she has this technical side because she's an accountant. So she's interested in sort of chasing money, isn't she, around the world?
Yes, and that's another thing that we are. Iceland is still recuperating after the financial meltdown of 2008, when all our banks collapsed at the same time, and there was a lot of money that got lost somehow, and it's quite a lot of it is probably being kept here and there in tax havens in the Caribbean, and we're not. And Aurora is one of these types that are quite important for Iceland and Icelanders, which is financial investigator. So she's like a sniffer dog for money. So she looks for money in hidden places. I think that's an interesting kind of detective work, because with hidden money, there's always something dodgy going on around it.
That's it. I thought it was fascinating. I thought it was a really great premise, and it's interesting because you've got that little bit of technical stuff going on. And I always love in a book to learn something new about a place or people or whatever it is. And I think certainly with her as a character, I learned a lot about that side of things, and the chasing the money. We had a bank collapse here too, and ours didn't fare too well. So I can sympathise hugely with that. But no, she comes across. She's a proper giant, isn't she? She's a great big character. So, Vanda, when you were writing Sam, how did she evolve for you?
Well, hilariously, when I first started writing the Sam Shepard books, I started writing them from the perspective of a male detective, but it just wasn't gelling for me. And then one day my husband did something just so completely dumbnut that I thought, I cannot understand the man I married. How on earth do I think I can write a novel about a man? So I changed the character to a woman, and she just appeared on the page, all attitude and fully formed, as it were. And it was like it was meant to be. But hilariously, complete contrast to Lilja's character. Sam's barely squeaks in over 5 foot tall. And so I purposefully made her physically small, because my mum only came up to about here, but she was small but mighty. And she always lamented that because she was little, people didn't take her seriously. Yeah. So I decided, okay, I'm going to use that as a strength, because if people don't take you seriously, they underestimate you. So people very often underestimate Sam. You know, she's very smart, she's intuitive, very empathic. And so, you know, she uses her size as a strength. And she's also got, you know, she suffers a little bit from that attitude. I'm little, so I've got to make myself big. Yeah, a wee bit as well. So, you know, she was definitely influenced by Mum. But another influence on her character was, as a young woman, I read a lot of Elizabeth Peters' books, and she had this wonderful character called Amelia Peabody, who was the first, as a young woman reading, really intrepid woman who went out there and broke down barriers and things like that. So, you know, there's a certain influence there as well about creating someone who was, you know, not what you might expect.
Exactly. I think that's great. And yeah, because she is tiny. And I think that's the thing where people underestimate. And that's wonderful to turn people's assumptions and readers' assumptions on its head, isn't it? So the characters don't quite know what to make. But I think she's great. I really, really loved her. And she is witty and she's funny. And as you say, she jumps straight off the page. They all do, actually. In terms of being sharp and really focused, Avish, your character is certainly, she really has her wits about her all the way through, doesn't she? And it's her wits and her sharpness that carries her through to the end. And you know, I'm not going to give any spoilers, so I'm not going to tell anybody what the end's about, but it's she needs that, doesn't she, to navigate her way through this very, very male, almost anti-female world that she finds herself in.
Yes, absolutely. In Pakistan, there's a great deal of misogyny, and it's kind of like ingrained in our society, which is why females have to be stronger. And this is where Abda, I mean, she's not very educated. So she sort of, she's not been to school, but she learns how to write from her younger brother.
Yeah, I love that.
And so she's very resourceful. She's very intelligent. And if she had gone to school, I mean, who knows what she could have achieved. But yeah, so she's not educated at all, but she is, she knows, she has her wits about her, as you say, and that really helps her later on in the novel as well. And she's also someone who is who doesn't take any nonsense. So if at the start, if you read the initial chapters, she's totally not taking any nonsense at all from her boyfriend of sorts. So yeah, and she doesn't take any from her parents either. So yeah, so there is that streak about her. So yeah, it was very interesting for me to write that character, because that confidence sort of got her through all the hardships she faced later on. And everyone thinks in Pakistan that if you move to the big city, every problem will be solved, and we have thousands and thousands of people, hundreds of thousands coming to the cities. But life in the city is not that easy at all, and that's what Abda discovers when she comes to Lahore.
Yeah, it's quite different, isn't it? Well, not what she expects. Yeah.
No, not at all.
Yeah, it's a tough old world, and I think that's what comes through all of the books. I love the fact they're female protagonists. I write strong female protagonists too, and I like feisty women, so I really, really enjoyed them all. Talk to me a little bit, Lilja, about your process. Are you a plotter and a planner? We've just got a couple of minutes left, so I'd love to find out how you write.
Not really. I think I'm a very instinctive writer. It always starts with the character for me. And I know it sounds crazy, but they like kind of come to me. You know, I almost hear their voices, and then I kind of build the plot around that. You know, it always starts with the character, then I build the plot, but then, you know, I usually nowadays, because I have written 9 books now, when I am halfway through, I only plot, you know, half the book, and then I see I usually know where I'm going, you know, how I'm going to end the book, but I don't plot except half, because when I'm halfway through, something happens and the story kind of takes over. And I mean, you all know this. It kind of, goes in different paths that you expected. And that is also the fun thing and the difficult thing about writing, is trying to control the story when it's flowing in a way.
Yeah.
But I mean, the books that I have plotted most are my best. So maybe I should do a little bit more plotting. I know it would be good for me to be a more organized, but I like going with my instinct. I'm quite impulsive in that way.
That's great. That's when the magic's happening, though, isn't it? Really, when the story takes off. Vanda, how do you approach something? Are you a plotter and a planner, or are you instinctive writer too?
A little bit in the middle. So I'm a very visual writer, so I tend to see things in scenes and then sort of describe that onto a page. Definitely not an all-out plotter, because I think I'd just get really bored if I knew exactly what was going to happen.
Too much, yeah.
So for me, writing is as much discovering what's going to happen. A bit like Lilja, it's like you're channeling something sometimes, and you're busy typing away, and you think you've got an idea in your mind what the character's going to do, and suddenly they do something completely different, and you're like, what? What just happened there?
What happened now?
Yeah. So I tend to have, when I have a book idea, I have like 4 or 5 pivotal scenes in my head and things that I know are going to happen, and I generally know how it's going to end. So I kind of use that E.L. Doctorow driving at night analogy, where you kind of know where various destinations are, but you can only see what's in the headlights in front of you at the time, and you've got to sort of act on faith that you're going to get to your destinations.
So trust.
And it's just trusting your instincts and your subconscious, and that the story is going to come, and enjoying the ride.
Yeah, trust the process. Avish, for you, plotter, planner?
God knows I try to be a planner. I mean, I draw up these wonderful outlines and everything, but when I do end up writing, when I start writing, I don't even look at that outline, and I'm like, why on earth did I waste all that time on this? So it's the characters take over, the story takes over. As Lilja says, instinct takes over, and I just don't look at the outline. So I'm definitely a pantser, and I don't know why I waste time planning everything. So yeah, you can totally be a pantser and still write a good enough novel, and then you can leave the rest to Karen to sort out.
This is Karen. Karen who runs Aurora, who is your publisher. Actually, in fact, all of yours publishers. I didn't even realise when I was talking to you originally and looking for people in different cities of literature that I was going to wind up finding this amazing publishing house, Aurora Books, who publish people from all over the world into English. So it's exciting. Very, very quickly, we've got 4 minutes left. So I just want to ask you about libraries in your area. Avish, you touched on libraries in the Carnegie Library. The Dublin UNESCO City of Literature is very much run by our library service, with amazing libraries here in this country. How are they for you in Lahore? Are they popular? Are they there?
We don't have any libraries. I mean, we do have one in Lahore, Jinnah Library, but nobody really uses it, and they don't have the books that anyone might want to read, actually. So yes, we're very much low on libraries, and which is why piracy is such a big issue in Pakistan, that the people who can't afford to buy original books, they end up buying the pirated ones. I mean, if there were any libraries, they could just go ahead and borrow those books. So yeah, we definitely need to invest in libraries, and I hope that if someone from the government is listening in, please invest in libraries. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lilja, for you, how are libraries in there?
Yeah, they are. There is a library in every neighborhood in Iceland, and they, of course, with the internet and so much being available online, I think the younger people are using them less. But I think they're still important, and now they have gone more into like hosting events, hosting literary events, and events for the community. I think, libraries were so important for me when I was a child. Both my parents lent me their library cards so I could take like bigger batches of books, because there was a limit how many you could take. So, I think it is almost every writer I know has had access to books, a lot of books at some point, and libraries play a big part, especially for people that maybe don't have a lot of books in their home. So hugely important and wonderful institutions libraries are.
It's definitely, it sounds like a nation of book readers and stuff in Iceland. And Vanda, for you, libraries.
Yeah, well, they've been a huge part of my life from childhood as well. And Dunedin, we're really blessed with library services here. So we've got a wonderful central library, and it's a community hub, like Lilja said. They have all sorts of things, not just book events, but music events, like they celebrate New Zealand Music Week by having music in the library, and a place where people can come and gather and get books out. And also lots of little suburban libraries and libraries up the coast. And the other cool thing here is we have 2 book buses, which actually bundle the books and park up in various suburbs around the place as well. So they take books to the people if people can't come to the books.
And that's wonderful.
We have a book bus as well. It's a clever thing.
That's great. That's what you need to do, Avish, with that enormous library of yours. All of those spare books that you've got in that. Avish has an office with the biggest. He has more books. He's keeping
I'd probably have a heart attack if I were to lend my books to anyone, because I'm very possessive. They're like my children. I have 4,000 children.
You wouldn't let them have.
I can't.
I can see you now. Yeah. Oh dear, that's wonderful. It's so interesting to hear about your places and your process and your characters, and certainly here in Dublin, libraries are massively important. And as you said, they're community hubs, and providing books for everybody, as well as events and everything else. They're really important places. So thank you so much for joining me this evening. And you're so good not to pick up on my appalling pronunciation of every possible word that I could have got this evening. I've been practicing all day. I wouldn't mind, but I'm just never going to make the stage, am I? So thank you so much, Lilja in Iceland, Vanda in, I'm not going to say it wrong, Dunedin, thank you, and Avish whose name I had to practice the last time I interviewed in Lahore. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm beaming to you from Dublin, and we are closing up for the Dublin Book Festival, but there are a lot more events happening this week, and we'd love you to tune in. And there won't be a bad pronunciation in any of those events at all, because they're far more professional than I am. So I do hope that you can tune into the Dublin Book Festival, and thank you very much indeed this evening for the support of Dublin City of Literature, because this has been really exciting to bring all these people, 4 different time zones, 4 different crime writers from 4 different cities of literature to you this evening. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.